Hey, welcome to the briefing. What I'm going to cover with you today is this. The surface problem is not always the decision problem. And for the next few briefings, I want to stay focused on three-dimensional consideration. So we are going to talk 3D for a little bit. Not in some complicated academic way. I mean practical 3D. The kind of 3D that helps you look at a problem and ask, what layer am I actually seeing right now? Because that is where a lot of leaders get themselves in trouble. They see the layer closest to the pressure, they treat it like the whole problem, and then they fix the wrong thing with confidence. That is the part I want to sit with today. The surface problem may be real. I want to be clear about that. When something is visible, it does not mean it is fake. It does not mean the leader should ignore it. It does not mean the person closest to it has no responsibility. The update may actually be late. The customer may actually be angry. The employee may actually have pushed back. The handoff may actually have failed. The number may actually have dropped. All of that can be true, but true does not always mean complete. And that is the 3D lesson. The first thing you see is often the layer closest to pressure. It is the layer making noise. It is the layer producing the complaint. It is the layer with someone's name attached to it. It is the layer that makes the room look at you and wait for a decision, so the leader feels the pull to move. And honestly, that pull makes sense. You see the miss. You see the consequence, you see the person attached to the task, you see the standard that was not met, so you want to fix it. But here is the question. Are you fixing the real decision problem, or are you fixing the layer where the problem finally became visible? That question changes everything, because sometimes the surface issue is only the part of the system that had enough pressure on it to finally show itself. It is not the whole issue, it is the visible layer. And if you only solve the visible layer, you may make the situation look cleaner while the real driver keeps operating underneath. That is where three-dimensional consideration matters. Not because it gives you permission to overthink, not because every issue needs a meeting, not because the leader gets to hide behind analysis. No. Three-dimensional consideration matters because it helps you read the layers before you aim the fix. That is the point. Read the layer before you aim the fix. Because a fix aimed at the wrong layer can still look decisive. It can still sound strong. It can still create motion. But motion is not the same as control. Now let me make this real. Picture a frontline operations manager named Marcus. Marcus supports several field locations that rely on same-day equipment status updates. These updates matter because they tell the field what is available, what is delayed, what needs to move, what needs to be rerouted, and what can be promised before the next operating window. This is not paperwork for the sake of paperwork. This update controls movement. If the update is clean, people can make decisions. If the update is late or wrong, the operation starts guessing. Now this particular week is already tight. 2 locations are short on equipment. 1 customer account is close to escalating. The regional director wants a clean status report by noon. Marcus opens the tracker and sees the issue right away. Dana, one of his team leads, has not submitted the morning update. Again, this is the 3rd time in 2 weeks. From the surface, this looks simple. Dana is late. Dana owns the update. The tracker is incomplete. The director is waiting. The field teams do not have the clean information they need, so the surface fix looks obvious. Correct, Dana. Restate the deadline, make the expectation clear, require confirmation earlier in the morning, maybe document the pattern, maybe tighten the reporting rhythm. And listen, none of that sounds crazy. That all sounds reasonable. But reasonable does not always mean complete. At the surface layer, Dana is attached to the miss. She owns the update. The update is late. A leader cannot pretend that does not matter. But the surface layer only answers one question. What happened? It does not answer the deeper question. Why is this happening here? Why is it repeating? What condition is feeding it? What will break if I only correct the person closest to the miss? That is where the read has to go 3D. So Marcus checks the pattern, not to excuse Dana, not to avoid accountability, not to soften the standard. He checks the pattern because accountability aimed at the wrong layer creates damage. He looks at the last 2 late updates. Both happened on mornings when field locations changed equipment status after the first call. Both times, Dana waited for confirmation before publishing because the first numbers were unreliable. Now the picture shifts. Dana did not simply forget. Dana was caught between speed and accuracy. That is a different leadership problem. The process says the field locations submit updates by 8:30. Dana publishes the consolidated update by 9, but 2 locations have been sending corrections closer to 9, sometimes even after. So Dana is stuck. Publish on time with numbers she knows may be wrong, or wait for better information and miss the deadline. So what do you think happens next? If Marcus only sees the surface, he corrects Dana. If Marcus reads the layer underneath, he sees the timing conflict. If Marcus looks at the consequence layer, he sees the risk of forcing a clean-looking report that the field may not be able to trust. That is 3D surface, condition, consequence, not as a full course lesson, not as a worksheet, as a leadership read in the moment. What am I seeing? What might be feeding it? What could my fix create next? And this is the part leaders have to be careful with. Sometimes the process creates a bad choice, then the person standing inside that bad choice gets corrected for the outcome. That happens more than people want to admit. The person closest to the visible miss takes the heat. The person whose name is on the report takes the heat. The person standing at the counter takes the heat. The person carrying the handoff takes the heat. But the condition that created the miss stays untouched. And then the leader wonders why the issue comes back. That is why this briefing matters. 3-dimensional consideration helps you avoid treating the surface as the whole decision problem. Because the decision problem may not be, how do I make Dana submit on time? The better decision problem may be, how do we protect speed and accuracy when the inputs are unstable? That is a different question. That question produces a better fix, a stronger fix, a more accurate fix. Now look at the consequence layer. Marcus could tell Dana, submit the report on time no matter what. That creates cleaner compliance. The tracker is complete by the deadline. The regional director sees the update on time. Marcus can say he reinforced the expectation. But what happens to the operation? If the numbers are unreliable, the field may reroute the wrong equipment. A location may promise availability it does not actually have. A customer may get an update that changes an hour later. Dana may stop using judgment and start protecting herself. And that last part matters, because when leaders punish judgment without fixing the condition that made judgment necessary, people stop using judgment. They protect themselves. They follow the rule exactly, even when the rule no longer fits the operating reality. Now the leader gets compliance, but the operation loses control. That is not a win. That is compliance theater. It looks cleaner on the surface while the real operating risk gets worse underneath. So now Marcus has to think differently. The goal is not to protect Dana from accountability. The goal is to hold the right layer accountable. Dana may still need a direct conversation. The field locations may need tighter input discipline. The report may need a way to show what is confirmed and what is still moving. The reporting sequence may need to be adjusted before the next cycle. The exact fix depends on the real environment, and that is the paid work in deeper training. But the recognition matters right here. The visible miss was not enough to define the whole decision. That is the 3D read. The surface layer says Dana was late. The underlying layer says the input timing is unstable. The consequence layer says forcing on-time reporting without reliable inputs may create bad information and more rework. The strategic layer says the operating environment changed, but the reporting structure did not. Think about that for a second. The issue did not disappear when Marcus looked deeper. Dana was still late. The update was still missing. The director still needed the report, but the meaning changed. And when the meaning changes, the decision changes. That is leadership. Not reacting to the first layer only, not pretending the surface does not matter, not avoiding the hard conversation, reading the layer before assigning the weight. Because if you assign weight to the wrong layer, the system still pays. The team pays. The customer pays. The next shift pays. The leader's credibility pays. Somebody pays. Now I want you to think about your own environment. You may not be dealing with equipment updates. Maybe you are running a store. Maybe you are leading a clinic. Maybe you are managing a project. Maybe you are coordinating a team. Maybe you are supervising a shift. Maybe you are trying to get updates from people who all have partial information. The setting changes. The pattern does not. Someone misses the handoff. Someone misses the deadline. Someone gives the wrong status. Someone waits too long to communicate. Someone pushes back. Someone fails to complete the task. And the first instinct is to correct the visible person. Sometimes you should. But before you do, ask yourself, was the person wrong because they ignored the standard, or were they placed inside a standard that no longer fits the condition? That question matters. Was the handoff missed because someone did not care or because ownership was never actually clear? Was the customer update weak because the person avoided communication or because the information reaching them was incomplete? Was the delay caused by effort or by sequence? Was the miss caused by the visible person or by a process that keeps forcing people into bad choices? That is 3D thinking, not complicated, just deeper than the surface. Here is where this gets expensive. Leaders often fix what they can see. Then they get surprised when the issue returns with a different label. Today it is a late update. Tomorrow it is unreliable information. Next week it is a customer escalation. Then it becomes a trust issue. Then it becomes a performance conversation. Then it becomes a process meeting. And by then, everybody is tired. The team feels corrected. The leader feels like they already addressed it. The customer still does not trust the update. The operation is still absorbing rework. That is how a surface issue becomes a leadership problem. Not because the surface issue did not matter, because the leader stopped at the surface. That is the difference. The visible issue matters. It deserves attention, but attention is not the same as full understanding. If you act from the surface alone, you may create movement without correction. You may create compliance without trust. You may create activity without control. Now let me be clear. Three-dimensional consideration is not an excuse to avoid hard conversations. I do not want this misunderstood. If Dana owns the update and misses the update, Marcus may still need to have a direct conversation with Dana. Standards still matter. Deadlines still matter. Ownership still matters. But the conversation has to be aimed correctly. There is a difference between saying, Dana, you keep missing the deadline, fix it, and saying, Dana, I need this update controlled. I also see that late field inputs are affecting the report. We need to separate what you own from what is being fed into your process. You still own the report, but we are not going to pretend the reporting structure has no effect on the result. That is a different leadership tone. It is firm, but it is not blind. That kind of leadership holds the person accountable without ignoring the condition. It protects the operation. It gives the team a clearer way to act. That is what control looks like. Not noise, not blame. Control. And think about the team watching this happen. If Marcus only corrects Dana, the team learns one lesson. If your name is closest to the miss, you take the heat. But if Marcus reads the layers and corrects the real driver, the team learns something different. The leader is going to hold standards, but the leader is also going to understand the operating reality before assigning weight. That builds trust. And trust is not softness. Trust is what makes people tell you the truth early enough for it to matter. When people trust the read, they bring better information. When they do not trust the read, they protect themselves, they wait, they filter, they give you the safe version. They only bring what cannot be hidden anymore. And by the time the problem reaches you, it is already bigger. So the way you handle surface issues trains the team for the next issue. That is a leadership consequence most people miss. Every correction teaches the team what kind of leader you are. Do you only react to what is visible? Do you punish the person closest to the miss? Do you add another tracker every time something breaks? Do you turn every repeat problem into a people problem? Or do you read the layer, find the driver, and move with control? That difference shapes the culture. A surface fix can make things look better while making the system weaker. That is one of the most dangerous parts. Marcus could force every update to publish by 9 no matter what. The tracker looks better. Reporting compliance looks better. The noon report looks cleaner. But if the information is wrong, the operation becomes weaker. Field teams stop trusting the update. They start calling around to verify information themselves. Now, you have duplicate work. The official report exists, but people still use side channels because they do not trust it. Once side channels become normal, the system has already lost control. That is what bad fixes create. A surface fix may improve appearance. A layered fix improves reality. That is the standard. Appearance matters only if it reflects reality. If appearance gets better while reality gets worse, the leader is building a reporting illusion, and that will eventually break. Now I want to slow down on one sentence. A leader can be right about what happened and still wrong about what needs to be fixed. That sentence matters. Dana was late. True. The tracker was incomplete. True. The director was waiting. True. The field teams needed the information. True. But if Marcus stops there, he may still choose the wrong fix. That is hard for leaders because we often think truth should produce the answer quickly. But partial truth produces partial answers. You need the layer. What happened? What condition fed it? What consequence follows if I fix only the surface? What does this tell me about how the system is working? Those questions are not soft. They are not academic. They are not slow for the sake of slow. They are the difference between reaction and control. When I say 3D, I am saying the problem has depth. There is what you can see. There is what is feeding it. There is what your decision may create next. That is enough for today. I am not going to walk you through the full execution path here, because that is where the deeper training belongs. But as a recognition layer, you can use this immediately. Surface, condition, consequence. What am I seeing? What might be feeding it? What could my fix create next? Take a customer complaint. Surface, the customer is upset. Condition, the customer may have received 3 different answers from 3 different people. Consequence, if you only apologize in coach tone, the customer may calm down today, but the communication process still produces mixed answers. Take a missed deadline. Surface, the report was late. Condition, 2 departments may have fed numbers into it late because the input deadline was unclear. Consequence, if you only correct the report owner, the next report may still be late, or it may be submitted on time with weak information. Take an employee pushback. Surface, the employee resisted direction. Condition, they may have been given conflicting priorities from 2 supervisors. Consequence, if you only correct attitude, you may ignore the leadership conflict creating the behavior. Take a handoff failure. Surface, the handoff broke. Condition, nobody may own the transition point. Consequence, if you only remind people to communicate, the next handoff breaks again. Same issue, new label, more frustration. That is the kind of read 3-dimensional consideration helps you develop. It gives you a way to look below the surface without turning every issue into a full investigation. Sometimes you only need 3 better questions. What am I seeing? What is feeding it? What happens if I only fix what is visible? That alone can change the quality of the next move. And here is another thing. The same issue coming back is a signal. Do not ignore that. When something happens once, it may be a one-off. When it happens twice, pay attention. When it happens 3 times under the same condition, stop treating it like random noise. That does not automatically mean the person is innocent. It means the pattern deserves a deeper read. In Marcus's case, Dana was late 3 times in 2 weeks. A surface read says, Dana has a pattern. A 3D read asks, under what condition does the pattern appear? That is the better question. If all 3 late updates happened when field inputs changed late, then the pattern is not only Dana. The pattern includes the input condition. That changes the decision. So when you see a repeat issue, do not only ask, who keeps messing this up? Ask where it repeats. Same person, same shift, same handoff, same location, same customer type, same timing, same system delay, same unclear expectation, same leadership behavior. Repeating conditions reveal drivers. And once you see the driver, you can stop chasing the surface. Now here's the practical recognition move. Before you make one correction this week, name the surface issue in plain language. Not the story, not the blame, not the assumption, just the visible thing. The update was late, the customer complained, the handoff failed, the employee pushed back, the task was not completed. Then pause long enough to ask, what might be feeding this? That is the moment the red gets stronger. Was the expectation clear? Did the person have the right input in time? Was there a resource conflict? Did the process force a bad choice? Has the environment changed since the process was built? Was ownership clear? Was timing realistic? Was there a handoff nobody owned? You do not need to answer every question in public. You do not need to make it a meeting. You are training your own leadership read. You are refusing to let the surface own the whole decision too early. Then ask the consequence question. What happens if I fix only the surface? Will it improve the appearance but leave the driver? Will it create more reporting without more control? Will the team comply but trust drop? Will the issue return with a new name? Who carries the cost if I aim this wrong? That last question should make a leader slow down, not freeze. Slow down enough to aim. Because every bad fix puts weight somewhere. On the team, on the customer, On the person closest to the miss, on the next shift, on the supervisor, on the process, on your credibility. Somebody carries the cost if you aim wrong. That is why this matters. Now after that, you still have to decide. This is not about avoiding action. Maybe the situation needs a correction. Maybe Dana needs a direct conversation. Maybe the timing has to be adjusted. Maybe ownership has to be clarified. Maybe the standard needs to be enforced. Maybe the standard needs to be redesigned because the old standard no longer fits the environment. The key is this: do not let the most visible layer control the whole decision. That is three-dimensional consideration in the way I want you to hear it today. It is not slower leadership, it is cleaner leadership. If you correct the wrong layer quickly, you still pay for it later. If you read the layer clearly, your next move has a better chance to hold. That is the whole point. So let's close this out. The visible issue matters. Do not ignore it. But do not let it own the whole decision before you check what sits underneath it. The surface tells you where the pain is showing up. The condition tells you what may be feeding it. The consequence tells you what your fix may create next. If you only solve the surface, the problem may come back with a new label. If you read the layers, you can find the driver. The next time something shows up late, broken, missing, incomplete, frustrating, or loud, do not rush straight into the first clean fix. Ask yourself, what layer am I actually looking at? What condition is feeding this? Who carries the cost if I solve the wrong layer? That is the difference between reaction and disciplined leadership. Read the layers, find the driver, then move with control. Thanks for listening to the briefing.